The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Well, greetings one and all, and welcome to another episode with our good friend Chris S., taking this amazing book that is filled with all sorts of just rich history. Walking Through the Language of the Heart is the name of the show because we are literally unpacking letter by letter, article by article from Bill W.'s Grapevine writings in the book, The Language of the Heart. Now, these are writings from 1944 to 1970. And by the way, if this is the first time joining us and you would like to catch up on all these shows, because this is episode number 25. Can you believe that, Chris? Episode 25.
Wow.
You can go back.
And we're only about a quarter of the way through this book.
Yeah, about a quarter of the way through. Listeners, you can go back and catch up on every episode by visiting us at take12radio.com and clicking on the Recovery Workshops banner. And once you're there, you will see Walking Through the Language of the Heart as well as other workshops as well. Well, where are we going on this episode, my friend?
Well, you know, where have we been? So the last at least 6 weeks, we were going over some really fascinating writings on the traditions.
Yeah.
So many members of 12-step organizations feel very, very strongly about the traditions and their purpose and their ability to keep fellowships together, keep meetings together. And, I believe these were some of the very first writings that Bill did on the traditions, but it was already fully cut cloth, wasn't it, Monty? I mean, it was flushed out a little bit more in the book, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, but he already had it nailed, what he wanted, the principles that he wanted to put forward as protective best practices for groups. So, that's where we've been the last 6 weeks or so, and we're moving on to a couple more writings of his. And like we normally don't do, neither one of us have read this or prepped or anything, because we want to experience these along with, say, some of the people who are listening to this. So we're on a request and an apology. I don't know what he's talking about here, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
And this was from December 1948. 1948 was a long time ago, Monty. These are really archival writings, but I'm telling you, the spirit of recovery just comes out of these articles in such a way that you cannot say that Bill Wilson was not the principal architect of the 12-step movements today and Alcoholics Anonymous. So let's start. Let's see what he's talking about here with a request and an apology. As an outcome of talks recently given, press reports carrying my full name have appeared. Oh, here we go. Since two of the 12 points of AA tradition emphasize the great importance of maintaining personal anonymity at the level of press and radio, I naturally feel uncommonly embarrassed and concerned at having been the subject of these anonymity breaks. Just how or why these lapses occurred, I have not yet learned. I had thought suitable precautions had been taken against them. Perhaps they were partly due to my own failure to caution reporters present at these particular meetings. In any case, I feel that all AAs are entitled to this explanation and to my sincere apology. Historically, there were anonymity breaks in the beginning prior to Bill coming up with this tradition of anonymity. There were people who felt very, very strongly about putting ads in the paper with their telephone number, saying if you want help with alcohol, call Harvey Gerbilfeather, at 652-4538. And people were doing that, and when these points of tradition, these principles started to be put out by Bill Wilson, sometimes there was a negative reaction to them, by people in the fellowship, how we are. But I really like how Bill is handling this. He's taking responsibility for it.
Yeah.
So he says here, everywhere, the press has been uniformly cooperative on anonymity when it is explained as a vital protection to the Alcoholics Anonymous movement. May I therefore urgently request all AA groups to carefully cover my anonymity on any future appearances, and I shall, of course, try to take far greater care myself. Let us never let go of this vital principle. So that was that was what he wrote and had published in the December 1948 Grapevine writing. And anonymity, I believe anonymity has multiple benefits. Mm-hmm. Certainly, Bill Wilson wanted Alcoholics Anonymous as a movement protected first and foremost, but also we can protect people's livelihood. Someone that I'm very close to, their past caught up with them the other day, and they had to pay some big consequences. And, I don't know that has specifically to do with this, but I know the person was in long-term recovery, and the past caught up with them. Sometimes that's going to happen whether you're remaining anonymous in a fellowship or not. But I can understand people taking precautions. I can understand people, wanting to be personally protected from people, oh my goodness, finding out that they're in Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't a big deal when the neighbors found you sleeping in their bushes, on Sunday morning. but now, you don't want people, to know. I think you're right. And this particular movement, this AA movement, has made it possible, made it preferable, for people in especially press, radio, TV, and film, to not blow it, not announce, to the world that you're part of our club. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it, Monty?
Well, I just I want to interject here. So I had an incident happen to me many years ago. There was a local newspaper. It wasn't the main newspaper. It was one of those offshoots, and they interviewed me on an issue that had nothing to do with recovery, but they wanted to say something about that, and I, about my own sobriety and recovery, and I said, that's fine, but I've got some ground rules for you, and I laid out to them that I didn't want, because it was local, particularly because it was local and I was new to the community, I didn't want my picture and I didn't want my last name used. They could do that, but they could not associate it with who they thought I was associated with. I said, in no way can you do that if you're going to use my last name or my photograph. And they agreed to that. And doggone it, don't you know it? They did not abide by that. When it came out in print, I got a phone call from somebody that I guess you could consider a little higher up in the organization at the time. And I got my blessed assurance chewed out royally. And of course, I in turn, had no problem chewing out the newspaper either. And I never did do an interview with them again, even though I was asked to several years later about another issue. But sometimes these things befall us, like it happened with Bill here, at no fault of your own. And it's just going to happen. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, and I thought I always chuckle at this a little bit. If you're known as Chris S. and I'm known as the Monty'man, the longer we participate in our recovery communities and in the world as productive members of society, people are going to know us by our new name, Chris S. or the Monty'man. And now it's kind of funny to me because now your last name is S and my last name is Man. You know what I mean? And it's like, now there's no anonymity because there are people today that don't know my real last name and they think my last name is actually Man. It's funny.
Yeah, I've never really thought about it like that, but you're right. We've changed our names.
Yeah.
But back a little bit to these newspapers. See, what I've seen over the years is this, that they are unconcerned with our anonymity position.
Yeah.
As much as they were in 1948. What used to happen is Alcoholics Anonymous, the people in the General Service organization, once a year would send out anonymity statements to all the press, so to anybody that might have anything to do with us in the media, right? Mm-hmm. And they would state, this is our anonymity position. Please follow it. Even when a member might not be wanting to follow it, would you please follow it? And I'm not even sure if those letters go out anymore, but if they do, I think the reporting world is less concerned today about protecting our anonymity and more concerned about selling a newspaper or an online, forum clipping or something, Yeah. So we probably have to be even more careful today than back in the day. Back in the day, you could trust a reporter to follow your suggestion, but you've just given an example of when that hasn't happened. Yeah. You know what I mean? So anyway, let's move on to November 1949. A suggestion for Thanksgiving, because this is November 1949. Obviously, it's Thanksgiving season, and Bill is thinking about more than just turkeys, I suppose. So let's see what suggestions he has for us here. The idea is in the air that AA might adopt Thanksgiving week as a time for meetings and meditation on the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, we might? I don't remember that happening, but it's a good suggestion, Bill. The friend who hatched this notion tells you why he thinks the idea good. I heartily agree with what he says and hope you will too. Remember, Bill was selling these traditions in a hard way. People didn't understand. Like when these traditions were being rolled out, he stumped the country, begging people to ratify them, and people like, well, all right, Bill, if you say so. It just wasn't what people were, thinking about at that time. So Bill is, continuing to sell this thing called the traditions. Anyway, it says pre-AA, we alkies could sometimes achieve that dubious state called sobriety, period. How bleak and empty this alleged virtue is. only God or a dried up drunk can fully testify. It's talking about mere sobriety or the absence of alcohol for the alcoholic, which some people continue to think today is the whole object and ideal of recovery. And we know that that's as far from the truth as it can be. If you just take alcohol away from a true alcoholic, you're going to create an insane person without some type of recovery from the mental, emotional, spiritual part of the illness. You're just treating the body if you're taking the alcohol away, and it's a much deeper illness than just the body. And some people just don't understand that. Why don't you just quit drinking, Monty? What do you have to do all this AA stuff for?
Right.
You know what I mean? You still go to those meetings, Monty? How long's it been? Haven't you read the book yet? There's just so much misunderstanding out there. Anyway, I digress.
That's all right.
That's what I do best, is digress. Anyway, the reason, of course, every AA knows it. Nothing has taken place of the victim's grog. He's still a man of conflict and disunity. That's a great way to describe dry. Conflict and disunity is a beautiful description of a dry alcoholic. Come then the 12 steps of recovery, bringing him to a personality change. The shattered prospect feels reassembled. He now says he seems all in one piece. We understand exactly what he means, for he describes the state of being at oneness. He's talking about personal unity. We know he must work to maintain it and that he can't stay alive without it. That's a beautiful set of sentences. The shattered prospect feels reassembled. He now says he seems all in one piece. He describes the state of being as oneness, which is in unity with, it's in concert with his fellow man and God. And that's really, that's a beautiful description of recovered. He gave us a great description of dry, and he gave us a great description of recovered. Don't you think so?
Yes. I love the way Dr. Alan Berger puts it. He says, it's about recovering your true self. And I see that in this statement. I'm all in one piece now. And what's he say? He is talking about personal unity. It's like I'm reclaiming what God had intended me to be all along. That's a beautiful thing.
It absolutely is. And I love Alan Berger's work. I do. He lives near me now. We've gotten together quite a few times in the last couple of years. He's about 100 miles from me now.
Oh, wow.
And what a gift that is. But I love his work on emotional sobriety. It's pivotal, and his workshops are great. You've had him on the show, right? Doing the work.
Yeah, we have. And just for a plug here, on that same page under Recovery Workshops, we have a whole series called Step by Step Toward Emotional Sobriety with Dr. Alan Berger. We did a whole series. We got like 20 some odd shows on that. And we had him on a while ago talking about his new book, 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety. And that's when he told me that he had moved out of Southern California, had moved up there by you.
We got lucky.
That's great.
So it says here, will not the same principle hold true for AA as a whole? Isn't it also a fact that the alcoholic is in no greater peril than when he takes sobriety for granted? If vigilant practice of sound principles is a matter of life and death for him, why isn't that equally so for the AA group and for our far-flung society itself? So he's likening the importance we put on personal recovery to be translated into our adherence to the traditions for the same purpose as being healthy and being able to survive. So when we take our sobriety for granted, Monty, half of my sponsorship has to do with alerting people that they might be taking their sobriety or their recovery for granted, because I usually get the calls after some part of meeting steps service sponsorship has been backed away from, or has been, the amount of time spent on it has decreased. And I had 2 calls today from people with exactly that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
How many meetings you getting to? Who are you working with? What type of service commitments do you have? Well, it's kind of dropped off a little. Well, so have you. You've dropped off a little. It just happens. You can set your watch by it.
Chris, it's the common denominator. I see this in working in residential treatment facilities. The common denominator amongst the people that complete those programs, people that fall off the rails, the common denominator is they do not plug in immediately to some form of accountability with people that have been where they've been. They're not in service. They're not giving of themselves, and they're not anywhere near being in the middle of the herd, let alone in the herd at all. That's the common denominator. And I'll ask them every time, well, what meeting did you go to the day you got out? Well, I actually didn't go to one for about a month. I had things to do. Are you doing anything? Are you volunteering at all? I mean, and it's always no. I think that, we could do a whole segment on this, but I think that oftentimes treatment is mistaken for recovery. No, that's treatment. Recovery happens when you leave treatment and you get plugged in and you're doing the deal in the real world. That's my opinion.
I really do agree with you. I happen to have a commitment at a place that lets me tell the truth. That lets me give like a full-blown big book talk. And I'm really lucky because there's few and far between. Treatment centers are few and far between that really want you to be that honest about spiritual recovery.
Mm-hmm.
They really want people that they're charging money to believe that they have the answer. When really treatment is about discovery.
Yes.
The steps in the meetings are about recovery. And there's some treatment centers that don't really want you to say that. You know what I mean? Like they want you to be loyal, and they want you to join their alumni association and send people to them and donate money. It's different. But I happen to be lucky. I'm carrying the message to a facility that really gets it. They've gotten it for a long time.
That's great.
What recovery really is. And the whole point of this place is preparing people to live a life of recovery,
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, they're fewer and further between these places. A lot of them are just revolving door cash registers. And I hate to say that because I have a lot to do with the treatment industry. But they're getting it wrong. They're pointing people in the wrong direction, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of times.
Yeah.
And then there are really good places that aren't. Hopefully, if someone out there is going to treatment, hopefully they'll go to a good one. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So anyway, it says here, yet many of us still take the basic unity of Alcoholics Anonymous for granted. We seem to forget that the whole modern society is on a dangerous and contagious dry bender. We evidently assume we are so different from other men and women that this disintegration can't hit us. Our unity appears as a gift of heaven, something to be perpetually enjoyed by us AAs quite without effort. And we can take our groups for granted. We can take AA as a whole for granted. He's right about that. Criticism is not intended because our present attitude is natural enough. It stems from the fact that no society in its infancy has ever enjoyed more providential protection against temptation and untoward happenings than ours. Minor troubles we have had, but none serious enough to test our adult strength. It's not strange that we are a bit complacent and self-satisfied. Surely there need be no counsel of fear or lack of faith in the prediction that a far greater time of trial may yet be ours. When we think our situation through, simple prudence and foresight will tell us that. Let's for a minute liken this paragraph. What he's warning us is, up until this period of time, Alcoholics Anonymous didn't really have any grave challenges, okay? But he's saying they could come. What about COVID? And all of a sudden, every meeting in the country being shut down overnight.
Yep.
What about that?
Yep.
So did the traditions play a role in us surviving all of that? I believe that they did. Our unity was important. So I know you, Monty, you did it in backyards, wherever you needed to be, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with me. I went on Zoom, and I had people over the house, and I would have sponsee meetings where my sponsees that could drive to my house would have to show up, and we'd meet outside in the backyard. So all of that, I believe, was being pushed by the principles that you learn in the traditions. Unity is important.
I think, Chris.
This paragraph, I think, is perfect.
You know what I think? I think something like COVID happens. I think it can actually cause people to come together and form tighter bonds, and people will press in. I mean, I heard a lot of complaining. I heard a lot of criticism. It certainly was showing up on social media. There was a lot of backbiting. You can't close a meeting about, all that kind of stuff. But, I saw a lot of people coming together and being very intentional about making this thing work regardless of COVID. I saw a lot of that, and that really did my heart well. That proved to me that this whole Alcoholics Anonymous concept, the whole kit and caboodle, was not only still under control by the hand of Providence, but the people involved weren't going to let it die. They just weren't going to. It meant way too much to them. I used to say people were too overprotective of their 12-step fellowships. I don't think they can be. I think it's way better to be overprotective than it is to be underprotective. So I was really tickled to death to see what I was witnessing.
I saw some amazing things too. There was a group that one of my sponsees started, and then he moved on, and the group continued on. But when the church told them they couldn't meet anymore, they met there anyway. And the church, they had the key, right? And the church found out about 8 months later, that they were still going. I'm going to stop, this is my life. So anyway, I can see him preparing us for a future of challenge,
right?
By reinforcing how important he believes these traditions are. So let's see. It says the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous are a distillate of our experience of living and working together. They applied the spirit of the 12 recovery steps to our group life and security. They deal with our relations with the world outside and with each other. They state our attitudes toward power and prestige, towards property and money. They would save us from tempting alliances and major controversies. They would elevate principles far above personal ambitions. As a token of this last, they request that we maintain personal anonymity before the open public as a protection to AA and as proof of the fact that our society intends to practice true humility. It's funny, the 12th tradition it really was important to in the beginning, for personal anonymity, for the protection of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it really has become the pendulum has swung more toward the humility side of practicing anonymity. So that's a very large spiritual concept. But he just gave us a snapshot of the traditions here. He reworded them in a different way. He's a wonderful, wonderful writer. I don't know that he's going to win any Pulitzer Prizes for his writing, but for someone in long-term recovery like us, I don't know about you, Monty, but I am enjoying so much of his writing. And this is another great paragraph. For the information of the general public and for the instruction of new AA members, the 12 traditions have just been released in a much condensed short form, which we hope will be as widely read and understood as the 12 steps of recovery. Should this happen, our current growing pains will be lessened, and we shall commence to lay up a great store of insurance for the years ahead. So the short form, I suppose the short form was published or put into a pamphlet or something. I'm not as good a historian to really know. And I don't know when the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions were actually published. I believe it was within a couple of years of this, though, this particular article. Monty, wasn't it like 1952 or something?
Something like that. I don't think it was.
Remember.
It wasn't. I don't think he's referring to it being put in book form yet. I think it may have been out on flyers or something. But
right.
I think it was much later.
I also think it was starting to be published in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, because in the back of Alcoholics Anonymous were, the traditions. It'd be interesting to know like the evolution of the different editions and printings of the big book, and where and how the traditions were inserted into the back of the book. What editions and what printings. That would be interesting. I don't know that. But maybe somebody out there
we can find out
is historian enough. All right, then it says, what then could be more appropriate than to set aside Thanksgiving week for discussion of the practical and spiritual values to be discovered in our traditions? We could thus reinforce our faith in the future by these prudent works. We could show that we deserve to go on receiving that priceless gift of oneness, which God in his wisdom has so freely given us of Alcoholics Anonymous in the precious years of our infancy. The gift of oneness. He's mentioned that twice now.
Yeah.
And it's really the first time I've heard him say that. And it's so cool. It's so cool. The oneness of recovery.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second. One of the statements in the traditions that has always bothered me, it used to bother me. Now I just wonder about it. We grow up a little bit. Things don't bother us quite as much, right? The older we get, hopefully. But that statement, personal recovery depends upon AA unity. That statement, I think to myself, this is my critical side, God, I hope not. Because of if my personal recovery depends on the unity of this fellowship, I have seen so much disunity in this particular group, in this particular town. If I was dependent on your unity, I'd be a mess, right? That's the way I used to approach that statement. I've gotten a little older and wiser now, and I think that it goes much deeper than that. But what do you think about that statement?
What's jumping into my mind right now is AA unity, AA as a whole. So yeah, there are going to be groups that destroy themselves, and there's going to be groups that are just so difficult to attend, you've got to move on. And I understand that, but AA really is a way of life. So
Yeah.
if AA unity, attaches to my personal recovery, I can see it as certainly the AA way of life is absolutely essential to my personal recovery. It just is. But I also know that some people move, some people become lighthouse keepers in Bangladesh or something, right?
Yeah.
And they're not going to have groups. They stay in recovery, practicing these principles. So I understand what you're getting at. I think Bill Wilson was so deeply ingrained in the building of this fellowship that's what his perspective was.
Mm-hmm.
This thing has to survive.
I think you're right. I think
maybe more is real.
I think you're right. I think it is the way of life. I think that's really what's being said here, because and what is the AA way of life? Well, bottom line is, you recognizing that there's an issue that you have no control over, and you need a power greater than you. You develop a relationship with that power, and that personal relationship that develops between you and the Creator, that is the AA way of life. It really is. I mean, I've seen a lot of gatherings that call themselves AA meetings, and I don't say it out loud, but inside I'm thinking, wow, this is not reflecting the AA way of life. And then I've seen them kind of turn a corner, and they start to do that as they mature. I've seen other ones go backwards. But it has to be something that you apply and implement in your personal daily life, because when the meeting does go sideways, or the meeting does shut down, or heaven forbid, all the guys and gals decide to go out at the same time. We've heard of stories like that before. You're going to be okay. Sure. You're going to be fine, because you've developed a relationship based on the spiritual disciplines in these steps with the God who is God. And you can go anywhere now. That you can be a guardian of a weather station in Antarctica and show up at the World Convention once a year. And you're not going to drink, and you're going to live in an amazingly free attitude of being recovered. And it's not dependent on whether, the street on 5th and Vine stays open or not.
When I look back on the journey that I've been on in the last 30 years, I like to think it's been a journey where I have been coming to the realization of my specific personal powerlessness and seeking power, seeking the power of God. And that happens by getting more in unity with God, practicing these spiritual principles to try to keep that part of my selfishness and self-centeredness muted enough to be able to hear the voice of God through my intuition. And that's really what my journey's been about. Now, I believe I've had to stay in the rooms with all of you to stay on that journey. Over the years, I've had to be part of a group of people who are living a similar journey.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Bill saw a lot of people back away from the meetings and get drunk. And I'm sure he saw a lot of people stick with the meetings and stay sober. So that's what he's seeing in 1948. And it's pretty much what I've seen, from my personal experience. There's something about backing away from the meetings that corresponds with backing away from the spiritual principles that allow me to grow in recovery. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, it's even I'm thinking about a biblical principle that states, "Do not forsake the assembly of the believers, as some have a tendency to do." That's a directive. So what does that mean? I think that applies in all sorts of cases. I mean, if you're a member of the Boy Scouts of America, you don't stop going to the board meetings and the council meetings and the planning meetings and the camp director meetings, right? You don't just stay at home and put on your uniform. If you belong to Rotary, you're hanging out at the Rotary Club. If it's church, you're hanging out at church. If it's Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to Alcoholics Anonymous. What are you doing in a 12-step fellowship if you're not going to the 12-step fellowship meetings?
All those are all good questions.
Yeah.
And you and I both get the phone calls from the people who get the answers wrong.
Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you what, Fred, I'll pick you up tonight. I'll see you at 5:15. Well, I'm still feeling a little squirrely. I'm just, pick you up at 5:15, Fred. Well, okay, see ya. And then I'll just show up, and there he comes, but sometimes they don't.
Tonight's no good.
Yeah.
Tonight's no good, man. Tonight's no good. I scraped my feet tonight,
Yeah. I've got reruns of Cheers to watch.
I had this one guy. Oh my God! I had this one guy. He's a brand new guy, right?
Yeah.
And he we pulled him out of the hospital. Brand new guy, and he was in really rough shape. And we were all gathering around him, fellowshipping him up, trying to be encouraging. And we're like, well, we'll see it. We'll see you next week. And he's like, well, next week, no, I'm going to be gone for a while. We're like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I tour with Fish. And we're like, you're 2 weeks sober. You're going to go away for the summer touring with a rock band, sleeping in a tent. What is wrong with you? But I always tour with the Fish. I'm like, my God. I'm telling you, some people can be crazy. And here's the thing. I'm a Fish fan, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. There's the yellow balloons and there's the recovery people that are at these concerts. And,
sure.
But when you're like a week sober, chill out, man. Just concentrate on meetings and talking with your sponsor and just, try to quiet your head. It's just crazy when you see some of this stuff.
I have to share this story.
The stories we could tell.
Last week, so my 12-step home group meets on Fridays, and last Friday, I picked up a guy who is new to the meetings. He's doing everything. He's crossing all his T's, dotting his I's. I mean, I'm just proud of this guy, and I think this was the second meeting. He picked up his year chip at the first meeting. This is the second meeting, and we're in the car, and I go, hey, let's phone Johnny up, and see if he wants to hang with us at the meeting. He goes, yeah, let's phone Johnny up. So I'm driving, so I hand the phone to him, and he's talking. Johnny goes, well, I don't have any way to get there. I don't have a car. And this other guy goes, oh, that's no problem. He looks up and he sees the intersection. We're on the corner of such and such and such. So what's your address? Well, I live on 10th Street down, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's no problem. Monty's turning around right now. I hadn't even turned around yet, and so I'm following this guy's instructions, which way to go. He goes, well, yeah, but I don't want you guys to go out of their way. He goes, that's okay. We just pulled up, man. Where are you? Sure enough, we had pulled up to his address, and he got in the car and he went with us, and he actually shared in the meeting. He said afterwards, he goes, man, that was great. He goes, that was better than any process group I've ever been in. He goes, I'll go with you guys next Friday. So we're going to be picking him up tomorrow too. I love that stuff. So here was a new guy leading the guy that hadn't even been there yet, to the fellowship. That's just amazing stuff when you get to watch stuff like that happen in people's lives. So, yeah, I'm all for hanging out, man. And I got to tell you, some of the worst and some of the best coffee I've ever had has been at a 12-step meeting.
I got to tell you a story. So I'm part of this group, right? And this guy Treetop Tom was the coffee maker. They coerced him into being the coffee maker, and you got to understand that the big huge coffee pots that make like 60, 80 cups, 100 cups. And you got to fill them up with water, right? And then you put the big thing with like a whole can of coffee in the top, and it percolates, right? Well, he's got to carry this thing all the way upstairs. He's got to fill it with water, and he's got to carry it all the way back down the stairs. And he looks, and there's a little window. It's in the basement. There's a little basement window, and there's a hose outside, right? So he goes outside, he gets the hose, he puts the hose through the window. He fills up the coffee pot with the hose water. And I mean, the sun had been beating on this hose full of water for like 3 weeks. You would not believe how awful the coffee was. And everybody's like, whoa, whoa. And finally he just raises his hand and goes, okay, I'll admit it. I made the coffee with hose water. And everybody's like, it's just, you got to. But the second thing I want to say is one of the greatest spiritual principles that I learned in my first year was this. You know what the spiritual principle was?
What's that?
Get in the car.
All right. With that, we are going to wrap it up for this episode. So listeners out there, if you've just been hanging out at home and making excuses, get in the car. Gee willikers. All right. Let's see. So next week, we are going to venture into segment 2. Additional writings from this period is what segment 2 is called. And we'll be unpacking some of those next. Chris, thank you so much, my friend. God bless you.
See you next week, Mike.
We'll see you next week, brother. Friends, don't forget to email us, take12radio@comcast.net. Our website is take12radio.com. Catch up on all the shows, all of our archives, simply by visiting us at any of those podcasting platforms or on the Recovery Workshops link. All right. Until next time, this is the Monty'man along with Chris S., and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you.
For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.